It started with one desperate text, a single dad out of money asking for help to buy milk for his twin girls. But the message didn't go to his friend. It went to a Navy admiral. What happened next would change all their lives forever. Before we begin, if stories of compassion, courage, and second chances speak to your heart, we warmly invite you to join our channel, Soul Moment Story. Subscribe, stay with us, and let these true-to-spirit tales remind you that even the smallest act of kindness can lead to something extraordinary. Now let's begin. The rain came hard against the cracked window pane, tapping like a tired drummer who'd forgotten his rhythm. Inside a small rented house on the edge of Norfolk, Daniel Carter stood in the half-light, holding one sleeping twin in each arm. The girls, Ella and Lily, were tiny bundles in faded pajamas, their blonde curls damp from the humidity. Their soft breathing was the only sound that didn't ache. The old refrigerator hummed in the corner, mostly empty, except for a half carton of milk and a jar of peanut butter. Daniel had been stretching the groceries for a week, now doing what every single parent learns to do, turn desperation into routine. But tonight, even routine was slipping through his fingers. He laid the girls gently on the worn couch, pulling an old navy blanket over them. Their cheeks were flushed from the heat. One of the bottles he'd washed earlier was cracked. The other still smelled faintly of spoiled formula. He rubbed his temples, forcing back the panic. He'd been through worse crash landings, storms over the Philippine Sea nights when the cockpit lights flickered and hope came down to steady hands and prayer. But this, 2 hungry children and an empty fridge, felt far harder than enemy fire. He picked up his phone, the screen flickering from water damage. His thumb hovered over a name, Tom Blake, an old crew chief from his rescue unit. The man owed him more than one favor. Just $40, Daniel thought. Enough to get through the weekend. Enough for milk. He typed slowly, carefully, not wanting to sound like he was begging Tom sorry to bother you. I just need $40 for milk and diapers for the girls. I'll pay it back next week when the paycheck clears. Hope you're doing okay, brother. He read it twice, ashamed of how small the words felt, then hit send. The message flew into the void. For a moment, Daniel just stood there, staring at the rain tracing down the window like thin silver threads. He imagined Tom rolling his eyes, maybe pitying him. He hated that feeling. Most of all, the quiet humiliation of being seen as someone who'd fallen too far. Then the phone buzzed. A reply. Are you sure the girls are all right? I can help. Daniel frowned. That didn't sound like Tom. He scrolled up and his stomach dropped. The contact photo was gone. The name wasn't Tom Blake. It read, Admiral Olivia Grant. For a long moment, he just stared at the screen, frozen. The name was familiar. Too familiar. She had been his commanding officer 10 years ago, back when he flew rescue ops for the Navy's Pacific Division. He remembered her as sharp, distant, and impossibly composed, the kind of leader who never forgot protocol, and never forgot a man's failures either. Damn it, he whispered. His hand shook as he typed again. Sorry, ma'am. Wrong number. Please disregard. My mistake. He pressed send and set the phone face down on the table, his pulse racing. Great. Just great. She probably thinks I'm some washed-up vet begging for handouts. Outside, the rain turned heavier, a steady roar on the roof. He leaned against the counter, staring at the faint reflection of his own tired eyes in the dark window. You've survived worse, he told himself again. But the words didn't land the same way anymore. The phone buzzed again. It's all right. I'm glad you reached out, even if by mistake. Are you sure you don't need help? He exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand across his face. She doesn't quit, even after 10 years, he muttered. There was something unsettling about how calm her tone sounded, almost human. Nothing like the voice that used to echo through the command deck barking orders at him. "No, Admiral. I don't take money from strangers. Thank you." He stared at the message before hitting send. When he finally did, the room felt even quieter. A soft whimper broke through the silence. Ella was awake, rubbing her eyes, her voice small. "Daddy." "Milk." He knelt down, brushing her hair from her face. "Not tonight, sweetheart. Tomorrow, okay." He kissed her forehead, hoping she wouldn't notice the tremor in his voice. He carried her back to the couch, and Lily stirred, too, curling closer to her sister. He stood there a while, just watching them, two little lives he never expected to raise alone. In the faint glow from the streetlight, he noticed a family photo on the wall, faded corners to curling. His late wife Caroline smiling in her Navy nurse uniform, holding the twins when they were newborns. She'd been gone for 3 years, now lost to complications after the girl's early birth. He'd traded the sky for janitor shifts, after that trading adrenaline for silence. The phone buzzed again. This time, he almost didn't look, but something in him needed to see. "I didn't mean to intrude. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. You once saved my life. Let me return that favor." Daniel blinked. His mind reeled. Saved her life. He remembered a night in Manila, a rescue chopper going down, smoke filling the cockpit, and a voice screaming through the headset. "This is Grant. We're hit." He'd been the one who pulled her out half-conscious from the wreckage. She'd been airlifted and vanished from his radar after that. He typed, hands trembling slightly, "Admiral Grant. You remember that?" A pause, then a reply. "I never forgot. Maybe fate wanted me to get that message." He read it twice. The words felt heavier than they should. Fate. He hadn't believed in that for years. The rain began to ease, the thunder rolling away toward the sea. He turned off the kitchen light and walked to the couch. The girls slept soundly now, faces peaceful under the soft navy blanket. He sat beside them, the phone still in his hand, its glow casting pale light across his calloused fingers. He stared at the last message. Maybe fate wanted me to get that message, and felt a strange warmth spread through the ache in his chest. For the first time in a long while, Daniel didn't feel completely alone. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and whispered to no one in particular. Maybe it wasn't such a wrong message after all. Outside, the first light of dawn began to break through the thinning clouds. The storm was ending. But something told him the real story was only just beginning. The next morning broke through the blinds in faint ribbons of light, painting the walls with the color of quiet hope. Daniel Carter stood in the kitchen, a half-empty mug of instant coffee cooling in his hand. He hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that last message glowing in the dark. Maybe fate wanted me to get that message. It had been nearly 10 years since anyone from the Navy had said his name. And yet somehow, Admiral Olivia Grant, a woman who lived in a world of brass halls, briefings, and crisp uniforms, had texted him like an old friend. He turned on the old radio perched by the sink, letting the soft hum of a local station fill the silence. The twins were still asleep in the living room, tangled in blankets and dreams. For a few quiet minutes, Daniel allowed himself to breathe. Then his phone buzzed again. "Good morning, Mr. Carter. I hope you and your girls are all right. I didn't mean to intrude last night, but your message stayed with me. Please don't take this the wrong way. I just want to help." Daniel stared at the words, frowning. Her tone was formal, but there was warmth between the lines. Something he hadn't expected from an admiral whose reputation had once intimidated entire squadrons. He typed back slowly. "We're okay, Admiral. Appreciate your concern, but you don't owe me anything." He hesitated before adding, "And I didn't mean to bother you. It was a mistake." He hit send. Then he set the phone down, poured the rest of his coffee into the sink, and went to check on the girls. But minutes later, another buzz came, gentle, insistent. You didn't bother me. Maybe some messages aren't mistakes, Mr. Carter. Daniel exhaled a reluctant half-smile, tugging at the corner of his mouth. She doesn't quit, he murmured under his breath. Still, something about her persistence disarmed him. Maybe it was because she wasn't talking to him as an officer, but as a person. That was rare in his world. He looked down at his daughters, both awake now. Lily was already pulling at his sleeve. "Daddy, breakfast." "Coming up, sweetheart." He opened the pantry, empty except for a box of stale crackers and one can of beans. He sighed, then glanced at the clock. The maintenance shift at the naval storage facility started in 40 minutes. If he skipped breakfast, they might have milk by evening. He found 2 slices of bread, split them between the girls, and spread peanut butter as evenly as he could. "Big breakfast today," he said, forcing cheer into his voice. Ella giggled, her eyes bright with the kind of trust only children have. "Yummy," she said, licking her finger. Daniel smiled faintly, and for a few minutes the house didn't feel so heavy. At the same time, across town, Admiral Olivia Grant sat in her office overlooking the pier. Her desk was a model of military precision files, a lined insignia-polished computer monitor glowing with unread reports. But her eyes weren't on the screen. She kept glancing at her phone. The message thread from last night was still open. There was something about his words, plain proud and painfully honest, that she couldn't shake. She had read thousands of reports, commendations, and incident logs, but nothing had ever carried the same quiet weight as that single text. "I just need $40 for milk." She knew that kind of dignity, the kind that refuses pity even when life is unfair. It was rare. Olivia leaned back, looking out at the harbor. The sea glittered in the morning sun, but her thoughts were a decade away. Manila, the crash, the chaos. She could still feel the heat of the flames, the taste of smoke, and the strong arm that had pulled her free. A voice shouting over the storm. "Hang on, ma'am, I've got you." That voice had been Daniel's. She never forgot it. Back at the maintenance yard, Daniel pushed a mop across the concrete floor, his mind miles away. The rhythmic scrape of the handle and the faint hum of machinery filled the cavernous hall. He had learned to move unseen, to blend into the background, like part of the building itself. A few workers passed by without a glance. To them, he was just Carter the janitor. None knew the medals once pinned to his chest now sat in a drawer beside unpaid bills. At lunch, he checked his phone again. Another message. "Mr. Carter, please forgive me if this seems forward. I've arranged for a small delivery to your address. You don't have to accept it. Just please open the door when it comes." He groaned quietly. She really won't let it go. He typed back, "Admiral, with respect. I can't accept charity. I made my choices. I'm fine." Then, after a pause, "But thank you for remembering me." He pocketed the phone, hoping that would be the end of it. But deep down, he knew better. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in amber, Daniel drove home in his battered pickup. The twins' laughter greeted him the moment he opened the door. For a second, all the weariness faded. Then he noticed something on the porch, a small paper bag. No note, no address, just a discreet naval supply sticker on the side. Inside were 2 bottles of fresh milk, a box of diapers, and a folded envelope. He froze. Inside the envelope was a short, handwritten note, "For Ella and Lily. No debts, no charity. Just a thank you from someone who still remembers the man who carried her out of the fire." O.G. Daniel's throat tightened. He stood there for a long moment, unable to move. Ella toddled over, tugging at his pant leg. "What's that, Daddy?" He smiled softly, blinking back something that stung behind his eyes. "Just milk, sweetheart." Someone remembered us. He placed the milk in the fridge and the note on the counter, its edges curling in the warm air. That night, after the girls were asleep, Daniel sat on the porch, listening to the crickets, and the distant hum of ships out at sea. He turned the note over in his hand, feeling the neat handwriting under his thumb. There was no pity in it, no condescension, just gratitude. For the first time in years, he felt the strange stirring of something he hadn't let himself feel hope. He looked up at the stars breaking through the thin veil of clouds and whispered, "Maybe. Some strangers aren't strangers at all." The morning began with the scent of rain still clinging to the air and the sound of children's laughter echoing through the small house. Ella and Lily were chasing each other between the couch and the kitchen, their tiny feet slapping against the linoleum floor. Daniel Carter, bleary-eyed but smiling, flipped pancakes on a skillet that had seen better days. He couldn't remember the last time the girls had woken up this happy. Maybe it was the milk, fresh, cold, and real. They'd each drunk a full cup last night before bed, giggling with delight as if it were a rare treat. And in truth, it was. Daniel turned the last pancake, his hand steady from years of flying, and tried not to think too much about the note sitting folded on the table behind him. No debts, no charity, just a thank you. He'd read it at least a dozen times. There was something about Admiral Olivia Grant's handwriting, firm, elegant, deliberate, that made the words echo long after he stopped reading. Gratitude, not pity. Maybe that was what disarmed him most. He had every intention of returning the box today, just to prove to himself he wasn't dependent on anyone's kindness. The thought alone brought back that familiar stubborn ache of pride that had carried him through every hard year since the Navy. But before he could gather the courage to head out, a sudden knock sounded at the door. It was sharp, precise, 3 firm taps. Military taps. Daniel frowned, lowering the heat and wiping his hands on a towel. The girls froze mid-giggle, sensing his sudden stillness. He walked to the door, pulled it open, and froze. There she was. Olivia Grant. The sunlight fell on the brim of her white service cap, her uniform immaculate even off duty. The gold trim on her shoulders glinted faintly, and for a moment, Daniel was back on the flight deck in the Pacific, watching that same uniform stride through chaos, as if the storm itself bowed to it. But her expression wasn't the one he remembered. Gone was the icy authority of an admiral. Instead, her eyes steel blue, and steady held something softer, something deeply human. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice calm, measured. "I think you may have accidentally texted me last night." Daniel blinked, utterly speechless. "Admiral." Yes, ma'am, I realize that. I sent it to the wrong number." "I didn't mean to bother." She raised a hand, slightly stopping him. "No bother." Her gaze shifted past him and into the room, where 2 little faces peeked from behind the couch. Those must be Ella and Lily. The girls giggled and ducked out of sight. Daniel stepped aside awkwardly. "Would you like to come in?" "Thank you." As she entered, the air in the small house seemed to change like the moment before a takeoff charged with quiet anticipation. She looked around, taking in the worn furniture, the patched-up curtains, the framed photo on the wall of Daniel, and a woman in a Navy nurse's uniform. Her eyes lingered there for a moment before she turned back to him. "I hope I'm not overstepping," she began. "But after last night, I couldn't stop thinking about that message." Daniel sighed. "I appreciate what you did to milk the note, but you didn't have to come all this way." "Maybe I did," she said softly. "You see, 10 years ago in Manila, I was trapped in a helicopter fire. Someone pulled me out. I never knew his name until your message came through last night." Daniel stared at her, the memory hitting like a wave. The smoke, the roar, the smell of fuel. He could see it all again the moment he dragged her from the wreckage while the flames licked the sky. "You were the pilot," she said quietly. "Weren't you?" He nodded. "Rescue Division Squadron 12. We didn't think you'd make it." A faint smile crossed her lips. "Neither did I." For a long moment, silence filled the room, two soldiers standing amid ghosts of their shared past. Then the sound of laughter broke the tension. Ella toddled forward holding a pancake half her size. Daddy made breakfast. Olivia knelt down, her medals catching the light. "Did he, now?" she said warmly. "That looks delicious." Lily peeked out next to her sister, her curls bouncing. "Are you a soldier lady?" Olivia laughed softly. "Something like that." Daniel couldn't help smiling. The contrast between the two worlds, his crumbling kitchen and her crisp white uniform, felt almost surreal. Olivia rose to her feet. "Mr. Carter, I didn't come here to offer charity," she said firmly. "I came because I owe you my life, and because I realized sometimes people who save others forget how to save themselves." He looked away, jaw tight. "I'm not looking for saving, Admiral, just trying to keep the lights on and the girls fed." "I understand," she said. "And maybe there's another way I can help, one that doesn't take your pride." Daniel's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" She smiled, just faintly. "Come back to the base tomorrow. There's a maintenance position open in the Veterans Program. No charity, just honest work. I'll make sure your application goes to the right hands." He hesitated, torn between gratitude and pride. "You'd do that? For me?" "For the man who once carried me out of fire," she said simply. There was nothing left to say. He nodded, a slow, quiet gesture that meant more than words. She started toward the door, pausing only when Ella's small voice called after her. "Thank you." Miss Olivia turned back, her smile warming the entire room. "You're very welcome, sweetheart." As the door closed behind her, Daniel stood motionless for a moment. The girls ran to him, giggling again, unaware of the shift that had just taken place in their father's life. He looked down at them, then at the note still on the table, and finally toward the window where the Admiral's white uniform disappeared into the morning light. Some mistakes, he realized, don't ruin you. They rewrite your story. He whispered to himself, half in disbelief, half in wonder. Maybe she was right. Maybe fate did want her to get that message. The twins tugged at his sleeves. "Daddy Pancake." Daniel laughed for the first time in weeks, really laughed, and for a fleeting second, the sound of it made the whole house feel alive again. The next day dawned with a clear sky, rare for Norfolk in early spring. The air smelled of salt and jet fuel, that unmistakable blend Daniel Carter used to associate with purpose. As he drove toward the naval base, the girls' laughter still echoed faintly in his mind from breakfast. They had begged him not to go, their sticky pancake-covered hands clinging to his sleeves. "Daddy's just going to visit an old friend," he'd said, smiling. "Be good for Mrs. Parker, okay?" As the base gates came into view, that smile faded into something quieter. The sight of uniformed sailors at the checkpoint brought a knot to his chest, a mix of nostalgia and loss. It had been years since he'd passed through this gate as anything more than a maintenance worker. Today, he didn't even wear his old badge. He parked near the administration building and stepped out, smoothing his shirt and brushing invisible dust off his faded jeans. His reflection in the glass door caught him off guard. The man staring back was older, harder around the edges, his once sharp jawline shadowed with fatigue. Still, his eyes steady gray, the color of steel, after rain hadn't changed. The receptionist looked up as he entered. "Can I help you, Sir Daniel Carter? Admiral Grant asked me to stop by." Her brows lifted slightly at the name, but she nodded quickly. "She's expecting you." He followed her through a corridor lined with framed photos of past operations, jets, mid-flight medals, officers smiling at ceremonies. Each one felt like a glimpse into another lifetime. When the door opened to Olivia Grant's office, sunlight streamed across the polished desk and onto her crisp white uniform. She looked up from a stack of files, and for a moment the formality of rank seemed to fade. "Mr. Carter," she greeted. Or should I say, "Lieutenant Carter, retired." Daniel chuckled dryly. Just Daniel's fine, ma'am. Been a long time since anyone called me that. Old habits die hard, she replied, gesturing to the chair opposite her. Please sit. He sat careful not to let the leather creak too much. The office smelled faintly of coffee and sea air, a strangely comforting mix. On the wall behind her hung a framed photograph of their old rescue unit. He recognized half the faces immediately, and one in particular caught him off guard. Is that the Manila mission? He asked quietly. Olivia turned to look. It is. The operation report still calls it the miracle extraction. Funny, Daniel said with a small, rueful smile. Didn't feel like a miracle at the time. Her expression softened. You pulled me out of that wreck, Daniel. I remember flame smoke, and your voice shouting over the noise. I never knew who you were until I saw your service record this morning. You looked me up. She didn't flinch. I did. I hope you don't mind. He shook his head. I guess I'm not exactly classified anymore. Olivia hesitated, then slid a file across the desk. After the crash, I was told your wife had gone into labor prematurely. I didn't realize she didn't make it. Daniel's gaze dropped to the folder, but he didn't open it. She tried to hold on, long enough for the girls to survive. She was stronger than I'll ever be. I'm sorry, Olivia said softly. I didn't mean to reopen. It's all right, he interrupted gently. It's been 3 years. But some things don't fade, you know. You just learn to carry them. Silence filled the space between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. For the first time, Olivia saw beyond the stoic face, the exhaustion behind his eyes, the quiet endurance of a man who'd been through storms no one else could see. She leaned forward slightly. You once carried others out of the fire, but since then, you've been walking through your own. Daniel gave a faint smile. Everyone's got their battles, Admiral. Mine just come with smaller paychecks. Olivia couldn't help but smile back. Well, perhaps it's time someone reminded the Navy that valor doesn't retire. He looked at her uncertain. What do you mean? She said, her tone firm now that the maintenance position I mentioned isn't charity. It's part of the new Veteran Reintegration Initiative. The program was designed for men exactly like you, those who gave everything and slipped through the cracks afterward. Daniel hesitated. And you run this program, I oversee it, she replied. But truthfully, it hasn't reached enough people. Maybe it needs someone who knows what it feels like on the ground. He caught her meaning immediately. You want me to help run it. I want you to help shape it, she corrected. To give it a soul. He leaned back, considering. I clean floors, Admiral. Not exactly a policymaker. Her eyes glinted with that familiar fire. You're the kind of man who acts when others hesitate. That's worth more than any policy. Daniel said nothing. Outside the window, the sound of seagulls echoed faintly over the harbor. He thought of Ella and Lily, of the note, the milk, the way they had giggled this morning, as if life had already started to feel lighter. I'll think about it, he said finally. That's all I ask, Olivia replied. And Daniel, thank you. For saving my life, for reminding me why I joined the Navy in the first place. He rose, a quiet nod, his only response. Before he reached the door, her voice stopped him. You still carry that photo in your wallet, don't you? He turned, surprised. How did you? I saw it on the table yesterday, she said gently. Your family. It's beautiful. He gave a small smile. It's what keeps me flying, even without wings. As he stepped out into the corridor, sunlight glinted off the framed photos again, heroes frozen in time. But for Daniel, something in the air felt different. Lighter. Like the horizon had opened just a little wider. That evening, as he drove home, the girls ran to meet him at the door, shouting his name with laughter. He lifted them both into his arms, the weight of their joy grounding him more than anything ever could. "Daddy, you're smiling," Ella said, grinning. "Am I?" he asked softly. "Guess I forgot how." In that moment, Daniel realized what Olivia had meant. Maybe it wasn't about being saved. Maybe it was about remembering he was still worth saving. The wind carried the scent of salt water through the narrow streets of Norfolk. That night, the kind of coastal chill that slipped under doors and reminded people winter wasn't quite ready to leave. Inside his small rented home, Daniel Carter tucked Ella and Lily into bed, kissed their foreheads, and turned down the lamp. "Daddy, will you be home tomorrow?" Lily murmured sleepily. "Always," he said softly. "Right here." He stood watching them for a long moment, two little faces, so peaceful they seemed carved from light. Then he exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. His day at the base had been heavy. Olivia's words still echoed in his mind. Valor doesn't retire. Maybe she believed that. He wasn't sure he did anymore. The rain started again just after midnight, tapping against the window pane like restless fingers. Daniel sat at the table, the glow of a single lamp falling over the bills scattered across it. Past due notices, overdue rent, another medical statement from when Lily had broken her arm last fall. He pressed his palms against his face. "One more week," he muttered. "Just one more paycheck." A knock startled him. He froze. No one knocked at this hour. The twins stirred faintly in the next room. He walked to the door, cautiously pulling it open, just enough to see the headlights of a small delivery truck fading into the rain. On the porch sat a large cardboard box wrapped in plastic. A shipping tag read "Only Naval Base, Authorized Delivery." Daniel frowned. He hadn't ordered anything. But when he looked closer, he saw a small folded note taped to the top. The handwriting was neat, unmistakably familiar. For Ella and Lily. No debts, no conditions. Oh, he stood still for a long moment, rain spattering his bare feet, the note trembling between his fingers. Inside the box, neatly packed, were things that stopped him. Cold cartons of milk, bags of rice, boxes of cereal, 2 new pairs of children's shoes, cough syrup vitamins, and a small plush bear holding a heart. Daniel's first reaction wasn't gratitude. It was anger. Not because he didn't appreciate the gesture, but because it hit the sorest place inside him, the one called pride. He pushed the box inside, slammed the door, and leaned against it, breathing hard. "Why would she do this?" he whispered. He sat back at the table, staring at the note again. No debts, no conditions. But it still felt like charity, and that to Daniel was worse than pity. By morning, the box was still untouched. The girls awoke to find it in the kitchen, eyes wide with curiosity. "Daddy? What's that?" Ella asked. He forced a smile. "Just something from a friend." "Can we open it?" He hesitated, then nodded. The twins tore through the plastic, squealing as they found the stuffed bear and boxes of cereal. For a moment, the house was alive with laughter. But to Daniel, it sounded like guilt. By noon, he'd made up his mind. The rain hadn't stopped when he reached the naval base. His old jacket clung to him, soaked through by the time he reached the entrance. The guards looked at him curiously as he carried the box in his arms. "Delivery for Admiral Grant," he said curtly. Inside, Olivia was reviewing reports when her assistant knocked. "Ma'am, there's a Mr. Carter asking to see you." She looked up. "Send him in." When Daniel entered, water dripping from his hair, she rose immediately. "Daniel, what on earth happened?" "You look." He set the box down on her desk with a heavy thud. "You shouldn't have done this." Her brow furrowed. "Done what?" "This," he said, sharply gesturing to the supplies. "You think I don't know what this is? Charity? Pity. I don't need that." For a long moment, Olivia said nothing. The silence between them stretched taut, like the pause between thunder and lightning. Then she walked around the desk, stopping a few feet away. "Daniel," she said quietly, That wasn't pity. Then what was it he demanded? Her voice softened, but it carried the weight of command. Gratitude. Respect. You saved my life once, and I've spent 10 years wondering how to repay that debt. Maybe I can't, but I can make sure your girls never go hungry again. He clenched his jaw, rainwater dripping onto the floor. You think feeding my kids makes us even? No, she said, eyes steady. I think it makes us human. The words hit him harder than he expected. He looked away, struggling to speak. You don't understand. When people look at me now, they don't see a hero. They see a man who fell apart. A janitor. A father who can't keep milk in the fridge. Olivia took a slow breath. And when I look at you, I see the same man who walked through fire to save a stranger. You haven't fallen, Daniel. You've just kept going when no one was watching. For a long time, he said nothing. The rain outside softened to a whisper. Finally, she stepped closer and placed her hand on the box. Keep it. For them, not for you. He met her eyes and saw no pity there, only sincerity. After a long silence, he nodded once. You're not easy to argue with, are you? A faint smile curved her lips. It comes with the rank. Something inside him eased. For the first time, he allowed himself to exhale fully, to let go of the tension that had been coiled in his chest since the day he left the service. He lifted the box again, lighter this time, somehow. All right, he said quietly. But next time, you let me return the favor. Deal, she said. As he turned to leave, she called after him. Daniel. He paused. No one is poor, she said softly, when they're still trying to do right. He didn't trust himself to answer. He just nodded and walked back out into the fading rain. That evening, he unpacked the box again with the girls. They clapped their hands when they saw the new shoes, the food the bear. Lily held the stuffed animal tight and said, Daddy, who sent this? He smiled faintly. Someone kind. Ella grinned. Then she's our friend. Daniel laughed softly, his heart unexpectedly lighter. Maybe that's what Olivia meant all along. Kindness didn't take away a man's pride. It reminded him he still mattered. He looked at his daughters at their joy and whispered under his breath, Thank you, Admiral. Outside, the storm finally broke, and for the first time in a long time, the night over Norfolk felt still. The next few weeks drifted by like a quiet tide. Daniel Carter found himself waking earlier, moving with a steadier rhythm, his days no longer haunted by the same dull weight. The twins laughed more. They slept soundly. The house, once echoing with worry, now carried the soft hum of ordinary life, a miracle he hadn't realized he missed. Every morning after dropping the girls at the local daycare, he drove to the base. His job was still the same maintenance shifts, fixing pipes, cleaning corridors, but somehow it felt different. People nodded now when they passed him. A few even smiled. Word had spread quietly that Admiral Grant herself had spoken with the janitor. Some whispered that he was a friend from her service days. Others assumed she'd taken pity on him. Daniel didn't correct any of them. Let them talk. He had work to do. What mattered most was that the Admiral kept her word. He was now part of the veteran reintegration program, not just as a worker, but as a quiet consultant. She'd told him his experience mattered, that his insight could make the system fairer for men and women like him. He still didn't quite believe it, but he showed up anyway. One Thursday afternoon, while he was repairing a loose railing near the officer's wing, a familiar voice startled him. Mr. Carter, is that you saving the Navy again? He turned. Olivia Grant stood at the end of the hallway, smiling faintly. Today she wasn't in her white uniform. Instead, she wore a simple navy blue coat, her hair pulled back, her posture still commanding, but softened somehow. He straightened instinctively. Ma'am, you're far from your command deck. I thought I'd check in on our new recruit, she replied, walking closer. How are the girls? They're good. Starting to like school. Ella learned to write her name yesterday. Backward is and all. Olivia chuckled. Sounds like a Carter to me. He smiled, then went back to tightening the railing. You didn't come all the way down here just to ask about my daughters. No, she admitted. I wanted to see how you're fitting in, and I wanted to apologize. That made him pause. Apologize for what? For the box, she said simply. I worried afterward that I'd embarrassed you. He hesitated, glancing at her. It did, he said honestly. At first, I didn't know how to take it. But then, I saw the girls eating cereal that morning, laughing like it was Christmas. I realized pride doesn't fill stomachs. Olivia's gaze softened. You're a good man, Daniel, he smirked faintly. I try to be. She folded her hands. You know, when I first got your message, I thought it was some cruel mistake. I almost deleted it. But something in me, something I hadn't listened to in years, told me not to ignore it. Maybe fate has a better radar than we do. He tightened the last bolt and straightened. You believe in fate now, Admiral? I believe in second chances, she said. Their eyes met for a moment too long. Then Olivia looked away, her voice lowering. Would you let me visit the girls sometime? I'd like to bring them something, books maybe. Daniel studied her expression. She wasn't offering charity. It was something gentler, a gesture of connection. They'd like that, he said, finally. You'd probably have to sit through a tea party, though. Pink plastic cups, imaginary cookies. I've been through worse missions, she said with a playful grin. The following Saturday, she showed up at his doorstep, right at noon, a paper bag in hand, and sunlight glinting off her wedding ring finger bare. For some reason, Daniel noticed that. Inside the bag were 2 children's books, a box of crayons, and a folded Navy flag patch. From the supply office, she explained. Thought they might like to make something out of it. When the twins saw her, they froze. Daddy, the milk lady Daniel groaned. Girls. But Olivia only laughed, a deep, unguarded laugh that filled the whole room. That might be the best nickname I've ever had. Within minutes, Ella had her by the hand, leading her to a small corner table covered in coloring books. Lily climbed into her lap without hesitation. The sight nearly undid Daniel. It was like watching 2 worlds, his quiet civilian life and his old Navy one, collide and fit together naturally. He brewed coffee while they colored. Olivia watched the twins with an expression Daniel hadn't seen before, tender, wistful, almost maternal. They remind me of my nieces, she said softly. I used to visit them every summer before deployments. They're grown now. Time moves fast, too fast, Daniel murmured. They sat in silence for a while, the sound of crayons scratching across paper filling the air. Then Olivia noticed something on the wall, a small faded drawing, a crayon sun, 2 stick figures, and the words, me and Daddy. She smiled. They drew that Ella did, Daniel said, after her mom passed. She said she wanted to make the sun smile again. Olivia looked at him, her voice almost a whisper. You've done a good job, Daniel. Better than most would under half the weight. He shook his head. Some days it doesn't feel like enough. She leaned forward slightly. It's enough when love keeps the lights on. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The twins were giggling over a crayon stain, their laughter bright and innocent. Outside, the wind carried the faint cry of seagulls. The afternoon light poured through the curtains, turning everything gold. When Olivia stood to leave, Ella handed her a piece of paper, a drawing of 4 stick figures this time. This is you, the little girl said, proudly pointing to one with a white hat. You're part of the family now. Olivia blinked, visibly moved. That's the nicest thing anyone's told me in a long time. As she bent down to hug the girls, Daniel caught her expression, gentle, unguarded, and full of something he hadn't expected from a woman who commanded fleets. When she finally turned to him, her voice was steady again, but her eyes shimmered faintly. "You were right about that tea party," she said, smiling. He chuckled. "Told you it was a tough assignment." Then she added quietly, "You know, Daniel, kindness isn't about who gives or who receives. Sometimes it's just two people remembering what being human feels like." He nodded slowly, her words sinking deeper than he wanted to admit. As she walked down the path toward her car, the twins waved from the doorway. Daniel stood behind them, hands resting on their shoulders, watching the Admiral's figure fade into the sunlight. For the first time in years, he didn't feel smaller standing next to greatness. He felt equal. The first warning came on a gray Tuesday morning, the kind that smelled like rain before it fell. Daniel Carter was fixing a loose ceiling vent in one of the administrative wings when he heard the muffled sound of raised voices echoing from the corridor. He didn't pay attention at first. Arguments were common in the offices, but when he heard his own name carried on a hiss of suspicion, the wrench froze in his hand. "Carter." "The janitor," someone whispered harshly. "You're telling me the missing funds came from his department?" Another voice, lower, replied. "That's what the audit suggests. Transactions tied to his work login. Suspicious timing, too." Daniel's stomach sank. He stepped down from the ladder, the world suddenly narrowing to the sound of his own heartbeat. Missing funds. By noon, his supervisor, an aging chief petty officer named Collins, approached him with a look that said more than his words ever could. "Carter, I'm sorry. Orders from upstairs. You're suspended pending investigation." Daniel blinked. Investigation for what? Misappropriation of funds. "Veterans program accounts," Collins muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "They found anomalies in the system, money rerouted under your access code." "Look, I know you wouldn't do that, but this came from high up." High up? That phrase stung worse than the accusation itself. Daniel stood motionless for a moment, then quietly handed Collins his badge. "I'll get this cleared up," he said evenly, though his hands trembled. By evening, the rumors had already started spreading through the base. The janitor stole from the Veterans Fund. The man who once saved lives, now accused of stealing from those who needed saving. When he returned home, Ella and Lily ran to greet him, their hair still damp from bath time. But the smile he offered them didn't reach his eyes. "Daddy, can we read the Admiral book again?" Ella asked, holding up a picture book Olivia had brought last week. "Later, sweetheart," he said softly. "Daddy's tired tonight." He sat on the couch long after they'd gone to bed, staring at the blank television screen, the echo of that word, stolen, turning over in his head like a stone he couldn't drop. He hadn't taken a cent. But innocence didn't pay bills or silence gossip. At nearly midnight, his phone buzzed. "Olivia Grant, Daniel, I just heard." "Are you all right?" He stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "They're saying I stole money from the program. My access codes were used. I didn't do it." Her response came almost instantly. "I know you didn't. Don't say another word to anyone. I'm coming over," he typed quickly. "No, Admiral, don't. This isn't your fight." But 10 minutes later, headlights appeared outside his window. When she knocked, Daniel opened the door before she could speak. Her white trench coat glistened with rain, her hair damp around her temples, but her eyes burned with the same fierce determination he'd seen years ago when she commanded rescue ops under fire. "Tell me everything," she said. He explained how Collins had delivered the suspension, how the funds had supposedly been rerouted through his login, how everyone had started whispering before he even had a chance to defend himself. When he finished, Olivia leaned against the counter thinking. "The Veterans Program Fund isn't easy to breach," she said quietly. "Someone wanted this to look deliberate, which means it's not random." Daniel frowned. "Why me?" Because you're visible, she replied. Because you're connected to me. He blinked. You think this is about you? Her jaw tightened. I think someone wants me discredited, and you're the easiest path. You're not just any employee, Daniel. You're the face of the program's integrity. Taking you down makes the whole thing look corrupt. He stared at her, struggling to process it. So, I'm collateral damage. She met his gaze, her voice steady. Not if I can help it. The next morning, the base was buzzing. Daniel's suspension had become official. Olivia was called into a meeting with Admiral Maxwell, her superior, and the head of the Oversight Division. He was an older man, with the sharp, polished calm of someone used to winning quietly. Olivia, he said smoothly, I hear you've taken a personal interest in this janitor situation. He's not just a janitor, she replied coolly. He's a decorated rescue pilot and a father of 2. And he didn't steal a dime. Maxwell gave a thin smile. Then I'm sure the audit will clear him. Until then, I'd advise you to keep your distance. The press loves a scandal involving misplaced compassion. She recognized the threat in his tone. She'd heard it before from men who didn't like her rising too far too fast. But this time, something inside her hardened. With respect, sir, I don't walk away from the truth, because it's inconvenient. He smiled again, colder now. Then I hope for your sake the truth is on your side. That night, Olivia drove back to Daniel's house under a heavy storm. Lightning flashed across the bay, illuminating the small home where she could see him through the window, sitting with his daughters, pretending to laugh, while his eyes looked miles away. When he opened the door, she didn't speak at first. She simply handed him a file folder sealed and marked, Confidential. What's this? He asked. Proof that someone's rewriting the narrative, she said. Transaction logs, access patterns, time stamps. I had a friend in IT pull them quietly. He opened it, scanning the data. He wasn't a tech expert, but even he could see it, dozens of irregularities all traced back to the same secondary access route. Whoever did this, Olivia said grimly, had administrative clearance higher than both of us. They used your ID as a cover. He looked up. Maxwell. I can't prove it yet, she admitted. But he's been pushing to take over the program since day one. Daniel set the file down slowly. Then we'll find proof. We, she echoed. He nodded, eyes fierce for the first time in weeks. If they're using my name to bury the truth, I'm not sitting this one out. You said it yourself, Admiral Valor doesn't retire. For a moment, her lips curved into the faintest smile. Then she extended her hand. Then let's bring the storm to them. He shook it firm, steady, unshaken. Outside, thunder cracked across the horizon, as if the heavens themselves were taking sides. And for the first time since that terrible morning, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in years. Clarity. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. Rain streaked the glass like falling ash as Daniel Carter sat hunched over his old laptop, its glow casting a pale light across the small kitchen table. Olivia Grant stood beside him, her arms crossed, her white uniform jacket replaced with a simple gray sweater. They had been at it for hours, cross-referencing access logs, tracing transactions, and decoding timestamps that twisted like threads in a web. The storm outside had eased, but inside the house the air was thick with tension and fatigue. There, Daniel murmured, pointing to a line of code in the spreadsheet. See that? That access point isn't mine. It's a ghost login. Whoever did this used my badge number, but not my device. Olivia leaned closer, scanning the screen. Remote terminal. Location hidden. But this, she traced a column of IP data with her fingertip. This signature here looks familiar. Daniel glanced at her. Familiar, how I've seen it before, she said quietly. In Maxwell's office logs, the name hung in the air like a flare in darkness. Daniel's jaw clenched. You're sure? "As sure as I can be without a subpoena," she said. "He's been using an encrypted server to reroute transfers under your ID. The timing lines up perfectly with the missing funds." He rubbed his temples, trying to contain the rising wave of anger. "Why me, though? He could have used anyone's credentials." Olivia's voice hardened. "Because you're the perfect scapegoat. A janitor, a single dad, a man with no influence. No one would question it." Daniel looked up, eyes storm gray and steady. "Then let's make them question it." Over the next few days, they met in secret. She couldn't risk being seen with him too often. Maxwell was already watching her closely. But every night after the twins were asleep, she'd appear at his door with folders tucked under her arm, her face lit by the cold glow of the streetlight. Their partnership was quiet, but relentless. She brought strategy contacts and the authority to dig into restricted systems. He brought intuition, mechanical precision, and a soldier's instinct for finding what others missed. Together, they were uncovering a story no one wanted told. One evening, as thunder rolled far off over the bay, Daniel slid an old hard drive across the table. "Found this in the maintenance archives," he said. "Was about to be wiped for disposal. Thought it might have backups." Olivia connected it to her laptop, her brow furrowing as data flooded the screen. "Good call. Look at this, logs from last quarter before the breach. These are unaltered records. The transfer codes don't match the current system at all." Daniel leaned in. "So someone replaced them." "Exactly. Maxwell's crew swapped out the main drive after the investigation started, but they missed this one." Her eyes lit with a mix of triumph and fury. "This proves there were legitimate payments to veteran families before the falsified ones appeared. He didn't just embezzle funds, Daniel. He erased real people's support." Daniel's voice turned rough. "He stole from the people who trusted the flag." "From men like you," she said. The words hit him like a pulse of heat. For years, he'd told himself his service had ended in that crash, that his life afterward was nothing more than survival. But now, something stirred inside him, an echo of the man who once refused to leave a burning cockpit until every soul was safe. He turned toward Olivia. "We need to get this to the Inspector General's office." She nodded. "Not yet. If we go now, he'll bury it before they even open the file. We need everything logs witnesses physical proof. Then we strike." Daniel smirked faintly. "Sounds like an operation." "It is," she said, her eyes sharp again. "Operation Twin Feather." The name came from a drawing Ella had made that hung on Daniel's refrigerator. 2 feathers, side by side, one large and one small. When Olivia had seen it, she'd smiled softly. "For the twins," she'd said. "They'll be our reason to keep going." For the next week, the operation unfolded with quiet precision. Olivia used her rank to discreetly request old data backups, while Daniel accessed restricted maintenance rooms at night under the pretense of repairs. They moved carefully, leaving no trace. One night, deep inside the base's communications hub, Daniel found something that stopped him. Cold, a small encrypted folder buried under archived files. Inside was a list of transfer accounts, all routed offshore. And at the top of the authorization chain, Vice Admiral C. Maxwell. He called Olivia immediately. She arrived minutes later, her face pale but composed. "You have no idea what this means," she whispered. "If we leak this wrong, it won't just take him down. It could shake the entire chain of command." Daniel met her eyes. "Then we do it right." They copied everything onto a secure flash drive and sealed it in a plain manila envelope. As Olivia slid it into her briefcase, her hand brushed his, an accidental touch, brief but electric. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The sound of rain against the tin roof filled the silence. "You shouldn't be part of this," she said quietly. "If it goes wrong, I can protect myself." "You can't." He gave a half smile. You said once that valor doesn't retire. Guess I'm proving you right." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then we finish what we started." By dawn, the plan was set. Olivia would present the findings directly to the Office of Naval Oversight under secure protocol. Daniel's role was to remain invisible, to stay on base, to watch, to be her unseen ally. But Maxwell was already moving. When she arrived at headquarters that morning, he was waiting outside the conference room, his smile razor thin. "Olivia," he said smoothly, "I understand you've been conducting extracurricular inquiries." Her stomach tightened. "My duty is to ensure integrity in the ranks, sir." "Of course," he said, stepping closer. "But I'd hate to see that sense of duty lead to misunderstandings. For both our sakes." Their eyes met the air between them, taut as wire. For the first time, she saw the cold ambition behind his practiced charm. "I'm not afraid of the truth," she said. He smiled thinly. "You should be." That night, she drove to Daniel's house under the cover of darkness. Her voice was low when she entered. "He knows," she said simply. "Maxwell suspects everything." Daniel exhaled. "Then he's desperate." She met his gaze. "Desperate men are dangerous." "Then we'd better be smarter," he said quietly. "Because this isn't just about clearing my name anymore." Olivia nodded, her voice a whisper now. "No, it's about saving what's left of the Navy we both believed in." Outside, the rain began again, soft at first, then harder, drumming against the windows, like a war drum in the night. The storm had returned, but this time, Daniel wasn't standing alone beneath it. The night the plan was set in motion, Norfolk slept under a shroud of rain and secrecy. Lightning rolled across the sky like silent artillery, and somewhere beyond the docks, the Navy base lights shimmered through mist like distant beacons. Inside Daniel Carter's modest home, the kitchen table had transformed into a war room. Stacks of printouts, encrypted drives, and handwritten notes lay scattered between 2 mugs of untouched coffee. Olivia Grant stood at the window, her profile cut sharp against the flicker of stormlight. "Once we send this to the Inspector General," she said quietly, "there's no turning back. Maxwell will know it's us." Daniel tightened the strap of his old field jacket. "Then let him know." She turned toward him, studying his face, steady, unflinching, lit by the kind of quiet resolve she remembered from their days in Manila. The same man who'd run into a burning helicopter was now standing in a small kitchen, ready to take on an admiral. "I've filed a backup transmission to the Pentagon's internal ethics branch," she continued. "If anything happens to me, the evidence will still go through." "Don't talk like that," Daniel said firmly. "We're both walking out of this." Olivia gave a faint, rueful smile. "You've always been better at believing in happy endings than I have." "Maybe that's what kept me alive," he said. Outside, thunder cracked, shaking the windows. It was time. They called the mission Operation Twin Feather, named after the drawing Ella had made the symbol of 2 lives worth fighting for. Olivia had given the name her official approval when she filed the encrypted data packet that morning under the Navy's internal channel. The goal sent proof of Maxwell's embezzlement to the Office of Naval Oversight before he could bury it. But they both knew Maxwell would strike first. The plan was simple, but risky. Daniel would infiltrate the base communications hub again under the guise of a late-night maintenance check. Olivia would enter from the command wing using her override credentials to trigger a secure file transfer directly from the base server to the federal database in D.C. Once the upload began, they would have exactly 12 minutes before Maxwell's monitoring system detected it. "Once the siren trips, everything locks down," Olivia explained. "You'll have to move fast." Daniel smirked faintly. Wasn't planning on sightseeing. At 2300 hours, the storm peaked. Rain lashed across the tarmac as Daniel slipped through the maintenance entrance with his ID badge and a mop bucket, just another janitor making late-night rounds. He moved through the shadows, the hum of fluorescent lights echoing in the empty corridor. When he reached the server room, he swiped his access card. The door clicked open. Olivia's voice came through his earpiece, calm and low. "You're clear. Beginning transfer on my end." He sat at the terminal, inserted the encrypted flash drive, and watched as the screen came alive with scrolling data. A soft chime signaled the upload start. "Transfer engaged," he whispered. "Timer's running." "Good. Stay on the line. I'll monitor from here." For a few minutes, everything went smoothly. The digital bar climbed steadily. The hum of the storm outside masked the sound of his nervous breathing. Then the alarms began to howl. Red lights strobed through the hallway as automated doors slammed shut. A voice over the intercom cut through the chaos security breach detected in data communications. "All personnel stand by," Olivia Daniel hissed. "I see it," she replied. "Maxwell must have activated manual lockdown. You've got 5 minutes before they reach your section. Finish the upload." He looked at the screen, 78%. Come on," he muttered. Footsteps thundered down the corridor outside. Shadows flickered through the glass panel in the door. Someone shouted, "He's in there!" Daniel gritted his teeth. He couldn't run. If he disconnected the drive now, the upload would corrupt. 4 minutes, Olivia said through the comms, her voice tense but controlled. "Not enough time," he whispered. "Daniel, listen to me. There's an emergency conduit behind the west panel maintenance shaft. When the upload hits 90, pull the drive and go. I'll reroute the rest remotely." He found the panel, pried it open with a wrench. The faint smell of dust and coolant filled the air. 85%, Olivia said. The door rattled. The security team was seconds away from breaking through. 90, she commanded. Soldornio yanked the drive from the port and ducked into the narrow shaft, pulling the panel closed, just as the door burst open behind him. Voices filled the room. Maxwell's among them, sharp and furious. "Lock down every exit, he's still on base." Daniel crawled through the metal tunnel, the sound of boots echoing behind him. He emerged into a dim maintenance hall and ran, clutching the flash drive like a lifeline. Olivia's voice crackled in his ear. "Transfer complete. I've sent it to DC. They've got everything." He slowed, chest heaving. "You did it." "No," she said softly. "We did." An hour later, the storm finally began to break. Rain turned to drizzle, and the first hint of dawn painted the sky pale silver. Daniel waited in the shadows near the old pier. His jacket soaked his pulse, still racing. Then headlights cut through the fog. Olivia's sedan pulled up beside him. She stepped out, her uniform slightly rumpled her face, pale but determined. "It's done," she said. The oversight office confirmed receipt. They've issued an internal alert. He let out a long, shaky breath. So Maxwell's finished. A faint, tired smile crossed her lips. Not yet. But the walls are closing in. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The waves slapped gently against the pier, the air heavy with salt and relief. Finally, Olivia said quietly, "You saved me twice now, Daniel. Once from fire, once from silence." He looked at her, rain dripping from his hair. "You saved me first." From giving up, the two stood there side by side, the storm clouds breaking overhead. From the base behind them came the distant wail of sirens again, but this time, it wasn't for them. By mid-morning, the news broke across every internal Navy channel. Vice Admiral Charles Maxwell placed under investigation for financial misconduct. His arrest was swift, his empire of deception crumbling within hours. Daniel watched the announcement from the base cafeteria later that day, standing in the same worn fatigues he used for janitorial work. Around him, sailors whispered in disbelief. Olivia entered quietly, her eyes meeting his across the room. For a moment, neither needed words. The headlines spoke for them, Single father exposes naval corruption. But Daniel only smiled faintly, turning back to his coffee. I didn't expose anything, he murmured to himself. The truth just finally came up for air. Olivia sat across from him, lowering her voice, so only he could hear. There'll be consequences for both of us. He met her gaze. I've faced worse. Yes, she said, smiling. And somehow, you always walk through the fire. That night, as he tucked Ella and Lily into bed, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, a calm that went deeper than exhaustion. He kissed their foreheads and whispered, "It's over now." But deep down, he knew it wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning, one written not by fate, but by two people who refused to give up on what was right. Outside, the rain had stopped completely. The world smelled of salt iron and rebirth. The sun rose over Norfolk that morning, like a slow promise, its golden light spilling across the base's steel rooftops and shimmering off the damp tarmac. For the first time in weeks, the air didn't feel heavy. It felt clean. Daniel Carter sat on the edge of his porch, coffee in hand, watching his daughters chase each other barefoot through the small yard. Their laughter was brighter than the morning light, and for a moment, he allowed himself to believe that maybe the storm had finally passed. Then his phone buzzed. Admiral Olivia Grant press conference confirmed at Oro 900. They're going public. He exhaled a quiet, steady breath. The moment had come. At the naval headquarters, reporters swarmed the courtyard, their cameras poised like bayonets. The scandal had exploded across every news network in the country overnight. Vice Admiral arrested in Veterans Fund embezzlement case. Words like hero betrayal and redemption flashed across every screen. But no one outside the investigation knew the full story or who had really unearthed it. Until now. Olivia stood behind the podium, immaculate in her white uniform, her medals gleaming beneath the sharp morning sun. Cameras clicked. The low murmur of journalists rippled through the crowd until the press officer's voice called out, "Admiral Grant, will take the floor." Daniel watched from a distance, tucked behind the security line, a quiet figure in civilian clothes. He didn't want the spotlight. He just wanted the truth. Olivia began, her voice calm and steady, carrying the weight of both authority and heart. "Integrity," she said, "is not a uniform we wear. It's a choice we make when no one is watching." The crowd hushed. Over the last several months, she continued, the Office of Naval Oversight has uncovered evidence of financial misconduct within our veteran support programs. It is a stain on the honor of those who served with courage and sacrifice. She paused, letting the silence stretch. But sometimes, she said softly, it takes an unlikely person to remind us what honor truly means. Murmurs moved through the crowd. Reporters leaned forward. Olivia looked directly into the cameras. "A man I once served with, someone who left the Navy not in disgrace, but in quiet survival, helped expose this corruption. He didn't do it for recognition. He did it for truth. And for his daughters, who deserved to grow up believing their father stood for something real." Daniel's breath caught in his chest. She continued, voice unwavering. "His name is Daniel Carter, a single father, a former rescue pilot, a man who once saved my life in combat, and has now saved something greater, the integrity of our service." The crowd erupted in noise, flashes, questions, shouts, but Daniel couldn't hear any of it. He could only see Olivia's face, calm and resolute, her eyes searching the crowd until they found his. For a heartbeat, they simply looked at each other. No ranks, no debts, just two people who had survived the fire and found light on the other side. That afternoon, every news outlet in the country carried the story. Singledad janitor exposes naval corruption. From rescue pilot to whistleblower, the quiet hero of Norfolk. Admiral honors unsung, veteran in public statement. Daniel's phone didn't stop ringing reporters, veterans groups, even old squad mates who hadn't spoken to him in years. But he ignored them all. He didn't want interviews. He didn't want applause. All he wanted was to pick up his girls from daycare like any other father. When he arrived, the teacher met him at the door with a grin. "Mr. Carter, we saw you on TV." Ella ran up, eyes wide. "Daddy, were you in a movie?" He laughed softly, crouching to hug them both. "Something like that, sweetheart. Just a story that's finally finished." Lily looked at him with curiosity. "Did you win?" He smiled. "No, honey. We told the truth." "That's better." That evening, the base cafeteria transformed into something Daniel never expected: a celebration. The air buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and a rare feeling of unity. Even those who once avoided him now came to shake his hand. Olivia entered late, escorted by a few officers, and when she spotted him standing by the window, she slipped away from the crowd to join him. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," she teased. "I'm not good with crowds," he admitted. "That makes two of us." For a moment, they simply stood side by side, watching the sunset bleed across the horizon. Then she said quietly, "You know they wanted me to take full credit, to say I led the investigation." I refused. He looked at her surprised. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," she said. "Because you earned the right to stand in the light, Daniel. Even if you prefer the shadows," he chuckled. "I'm more comfortable mopping floors than giving speeches." She turned to him, her expression soft. "You remind people that heroism doesn't retire when the uniform comes off. That's what they'll remember." Before he could reply, the base commander approached the podium, tapping the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we honor a man whose courage reminds us what service truly means. Please welcome Mr. Daniel Carter." Applause thundered through the hall. Daniel froze. "Oh, no, 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 no." Olivia smiled, nudging him forward. "Go on, Lieutenant." He laughed under his breath and shook his head, but she was already clapping. The crowd followed her lead, and he realized there was no escape. He stepped to the podium, the sound of hundreds of hands filling his ears. For a moment he stood silent, then said simply, "I don't have a speech. I'm not an admiral. I'm just a father who wanted to teach his girls the difference between right and easy." The room fell quiet. "My daughters think I'm a janitor." He continued, smiling faintly. "And they're right. Because cleaning up, whether it's a floor or a mess someone else made, that's what good people do. We try to leave things better than we found them." There was a long pause. Then the applause began again, louder this time, deeper, real. Olivia's eyes glistened as she watched him. She mouthed one word across the room, "Proud." After the ceremony, they met outside under the soft glow of the courtyard lights. The air smelled of rain and salt again, like the night everything began. "Where will you go from here?" she asked. He shrugged. "Wherever they'll let a janitor with too much heart and too little sleep. Go." She smiled. "There's talk in D.C. about reinstating your rank, with honors." He laughed softly. "I don't need a uniform to keep serving." "No," she said, stepping closer. "But maybe you deserve one more chance to wear it." The wind lifted her hair slightly, and for a brief moment, the distance between them vanished. Daniel looked at her, looked, and said quietly, "You know, Admiral, if all this started with a wrong message, I'm starting to think it was the right one." Her smile was warm, steady. "So am I." Behind them, the American flag rippled in the wind, illuminated by floodlights. It didn't feel like ceremony. It felt like home. That night, when Daniel returned home, the twins were already asleep. He stood in their doorway watching them dream and whispered, "We did it, girls. The world knows now." And as the last traces of sunset faded into night, Daniel Carter, once broken, once forgotten, finally felt whole again. A full year had passed since the storm broke over Norfolk, since headlines blazed Daniel Carter's name beside words like honor, truth, and redemption. But time, as it always did, had softened the noise. The reporters stopped calling the photos, faded from the front page, and life settled back into something simpler, something almost peaceful. On a crisp spring morning, Daniel stood outside the newly painted building on the edge of the naval complex. The sign above the entrance read, Hearts of Service Veterans Family Support Center. He ran his hand across the fresh lettering, his expression a quiet mix of pride and disbelief. A few months earlier, Olivia Grant had retired from active duty, turning down another promotion to start this very initiative. And when she asked him to help lead it, Daniel hadn't hesitated. Now, instead of mopping floors, he was helping veterans and their families find new footing. Men and women who'd worn the uniform came through the doors every day, not to beg, but to rebuild. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. And Daniel had never felt more at home. Inside, the sound of children's laughter echoed through the lobby. Ella and Lily were helping hang handmade flags drawn by the veterans' kids. Crayon heart stick figures smiling suns. The kind of art that didn't just decorate a wall, it healed it. Daddy Ella called out, waving a paintbrush. Look, we made you one too. He smiled as she held up a small poster. In crooked, colorful letters it read, Heroes don't wear uniforms, they tuck us in at night. Daniel knelt down, his throat tightening. That's the best medal I've ever seen. Lily giggled. You can hang it next to the milk ladies. He laughed. You mean Admiral Grant? Yeah, Ella said proudly. She said she's coming today. He checked his watch. Then we'd better finish cleaning before the Admiral arrives, huh? The girls scampered off, and for a moment Daniel just stood there, taking in the hum of life around him, the chatter, the laughter, the faint scent of coffee and paint. This place had been built from ashes, brick by brick, kindness by kindness, and at the center of it all was one text message sent by mistake. Outside, a familiar car pulled into the parking lot, a sleek navy blue sedan. Olivia Grant stepped out wearing civilian clothes, for the first time Daniel could remember, jeans, a soft white sweater, and a faint smile that didn't need rank or ribbons to hold authority. She spotted him immediately and waved. Mr. Director Carter, she said teasingly as she walked up. How's the Empire holding up? He chuckled. Running smoothly, ma'am. Though the little ones have a tendency to reorganize the crayons by chaos instead of color. Creative management, she said, her eyes glinting. They walked inside together, where the twins greeted her with shrieks of excitement. Olivia knelt down, accepting their hugs like they were medals. She always did. You girls have grown, she said warmly. What's your secret, pancakes? Lily exclaimed. And Daddy smiles more, now, Ella added. Olivia looked up at Daniel. Is that true? He shrugged with mock modesty. I guess I had good leadership. She smiled faintly, glancing around the building. You've done wonders here, Daniel. You turned an idea into something living. Every wall, every face here, this is what service looks like when the war is over. Couldn't have done it without you, he said sincerely. You could have, she replied. You just needed a nudge. They walked through the center together, stopping to greet veterans and families. Olivia spoke with the same steady warmth she once used to command a fleet, asking names, remembering faces, listening. Daniel watched her, thinking how different she looked now. Lighter, almost radiant. When they reached his office, she paused at the doorway. On the desk sat a framed copy of the article from the previous year's ceremony, next to a photo of the twins and a single sheet of paper, creased, faded, but preserved beneath glass. Olivia stepped closer, reading the words printed on it. "Tom, sorry to bother you. I just need $40 for milk and diapers for the girls. I'll pay it back next week when the paycheck clears." She smiled softly. "You kept it?" "Couldn't throw it away," Daniel said. "It's the reason everything changed." Olivia studied the note, her voice gentle. "It's strange, isn't it? A single message sent by mistake. And here we are." He nodded. Maybe it wasn't a mistake at all. For a moment they stood in comfortable silence, the hum of the building around them like distant music. Then she said quietly, "Do you remember what I told you that first night? That maybe fate wanted me to get that message?" "I remember," he said, smiling. "I didn't believe you back then." And now he looked at her eyes, warm and steady. "Now I think fate was just waiting for two stubborn people to listen." She laughed softly, the sound filling the room. "You always did have a way of turning simple truths into wisdom." He chuckled. "That's what happens when you mop floors long enough. You learn to see reflections clearly." Olivia smiled at that, her gaze softening. "You know, I used to think command was about giving orders. But it was really about moments like this, finding people who remind you why you started in the first place." Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. "And you did that, Olivia. You reminded me." Their eyes met, two souls, bound not by duty but by something deeper, respect, gratitude, quiet affection, born from shared battlefields and second chances. Ella's voice suddenly called out from the hallway, "Daddy." "The cookies are ready," Olivia smiled. Duty calls. They joined the small group in the lobby, where the children had arranged a tray of cookies shaped like stars and hearts. Olivia bit into one and laughed. "I've had Navy rations better than this, but none this meaningful." Lily grinned. "We made them for everyone who helps people." Daniel raised a cookie in mock salute. "Then I guess that means us." Olivia matched his gesture, smiling, to kindness and to second chances. They clinked cookies instead of glasses, laughter filling the room. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, Daniel stood alone in the quiet lobby. The sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the tiled floor. He pulled out his phone, the same one that had once sent that fateful text, and scrolled to his message history. There it was, her first reply still pinned at the top. "Are you sure the girls are all right? I can help." He smiled faintly, typing a new message beneath it. "They're more than all right. And so am I. Thank you for everything." He hit send. A moment later, his phone buzzed with her reply. "You're welcome, Daniel. Some wrong messages are just the world's way of finding the right people." He set the phone down, turned off the lights, and stepped outside. The night air was cool, the sky wide and full of stars. He could hear the ocean in the distance, steady as a heartbeat. Daniel Carter took a deep breath, hands in his pockets, and smiled to himself. "Yeah," he murmured. It was the right message after all. "Before you go, we'd love to know where you're watching from tonight. Tell us in the comments below. It's always heartwarming to see how kindness connects people from every corner of the world. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or reminded you that quiet heroes still walk among us, we warmly invite you to subscribe to our channel. Join our growing family of listeners who believe in the power of compassion, courage, and second chances. From all of us here, thank you for spending your time with us, for sharing these moments, and for keeping the spirit of goodness alive. Until next time, may kindness find its way back to you.